Okay, this is the Witcher 3 Performance Report. And unlike the Grand Theft Auto one, this time I do have game footage because the game didn't crash the moment I tried to record. So, to get things out of the way first, I am running a Phenom 955 Black Edition without any overclocking at all. I have 8 gigs of DDR2 RAM, and I am using an AMD 280X factory overclock to what the 7970 gigahertz edition would have been. So, with that out of the way, I pre-recorded a bit for while I'm looking at the options menu. I will cut to that now. A quick note before we go to the pre-recorded stuff. I don't upgrade my graphics drivers to beta, I only do full releases, and the last full release I had was the Omega drivers, which were, I believe, either October or December. I forget exactly when they came out. This game does not require up-to-date drivers, at least on AMD, to run well. Okay, so, video, graphics. This is what I have my game set to. I have Nvidia's Hairworks off because I am running AMD, and even on Nvidia stuff, Hairworks really tanks performance for not so much benefit. Especially if you're just to go to Geralt. It isn't worth it for just that, the performance you'd get. If you could actually handle it on everything, then it would be worth it, but no. It's not worth the massive frame loss you get. The background characters are set to Ultra mostly because I can handle it, and I don't think there's going to be a need to fight while all the background characters are actually in the game. If there's ever a point where background characters are in the game and I have to fight, I'm going to turn this down to high. But this option takes the most CPU power and the most graphics power while you're in the city. Outside of the city, it doesn't matter. Shadow quality is set to high because there's not that big of a difference between high and ultra. I'm thinking of setting it to ultra just to test it out later, but I don't think there's that big of a difference. Set water quality to ultra because there's almost no difference between high and ultra, but performance wise, but you will see the difference. Terrain quality. I honestly forget what this does. I think it just adds a bit extra stuff to the terrain, like extra rocks and shit. I could be wrong there. Grass density is another one that you can really turn down, and you're not going to have that big of an impact in the gameplay. But you might want to have it up. I would highly recommend not going into the INI and increasing the grass density any higher than it already is set at, because that tends to look like hell. Texture quality, you only need 2 gigabytes of on a GPU to be able to handle ultra textures. If you have at least 2 gigabytes, fucking go for it. Foliage view distance at high is honestly where you should set it at. If you can handle ultra, go for it, but it's taking away performance for no real reason. Detail level. I honestly forget what this does, but I don't believe it impacts performance all that much. And hardware cursor on and off. I don't fucking know what it is. I'm sure I do, but I just can't think of it off the top of my head. I might turn it on if I figure out what it is again. Post-processing. Motion blur should go off. Blur. Honestly, I turned off motion blur, and bloom just because I fucking hate it. Sharpening. I don't believe there is a difference in the game sharpening wise. I don't think there's a difference in performance either, so it's really up to you. For me personally, I play games at 1080p. I used to play games on PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, Nintendo 64, fucking Super Nintendo with Star Fox. I know what bad aliasing looks like. For me personally, I don't give a shit about aliasing once 720p or even 1080p is there. But some people really can't handle aliasing at all, and this does impact performance. I leave it off, but if you have the horsepower to keep it on, there's no real downside to keeping it on unless you have a 120, 144 hertz monitor. Depth of field, let's turn that off. Depth of field in this game is absolutely fucking pathetic, but it impacts performance. I don't know if this turns it off for cutscenes. It might not. I don't know. And I fucking hate chromatic aberration. Now, as for ambient occlusion, SSAO is the default. HBAO Plus is a lot better. I don't know how it'll impact performance for me, but it does take a bit more performance to keep it on HBAO Plus. I'd honestly recommend leaving it at SSAO if you can, but none doesn't look bad, it's just missing something. And for that, I believe we are done with the options menu. Okay, since I went to the options menu, I went and I put on HABO plus, what is that shit called? The shadowy in the corner stuff. God, I can't remember what that shit. Ambient occlusion. I put on the highest ambient occlusion that the game would give me, and I dropped the shadow quality down to the lowest setting because I didn't notice a difference between ultra and low, but I did see that on ultra I was getting about 42 frames a second in the battlefield area, and with it on low I was getting about 50, so good trade-off there. And turning the SSAO up to the HABO plus, whatever the fuck that thing is called, the highest ambient occlusion, I was getting about 46 to 50 in that area. So overall, I think I got better looking visuals while getting better frame rate. Now, I'm also running this game at 1080p, so let's keep that in mind. Okay, so I boot the game up, and the first thing that I see is that the hair shit is on. And that is really killing the frames. And it doesn't add enough to the character's look to justify the performance hit, at least in my opinion. It isn't like Lara Croft where if you turn the tress effects off, the hair looked like shit. This hair looks good on and off, so I opt to turn it off. In that same vein, I turn off many settings in the game that I just don't like at all. I hate motion blur, I hate blurriness. Depth of field is such a subtle effect in this game outside of cutscenes. I don't know if during cutscenes depth of field is off, but I'm willing to sacrifice that for some more frames, given how subtle it is in normal gameplay. But that said, with the settings basically where they were now, but most of it turned to high, not ultra, with the hair effects on, I was getting about 30 frames a second in an enclosed environment, and that was not cutting it. Turning the hair effects off, turning much of what I have now up to ultra, gave me 60 frames per second in that enclosed environment. And the worst that the game has ever given me was when, I don't even think this is a spoiler, but the beginning of the game, I believe, is a dream sequence. Towards the end of the dream sequence, something happened that just killed the frames for a couple of seconds, and I think that was loading things into the game. I'm not sure. I can't really figure out why, and I don't really want to go back to try and figure out why the frames tanked, but that was the only part of the game that went sub 30 when I had reasonable settings on. There are benchmarks showing that this game, even on a Titan X, requires retarded settings, but I don't experience that at all. This game, given my setup and how poorly Dragon Age Inquisition ran, how shitty Grand Theft Auto 5 has been on my computer, most of it I can add up to my CPU not being up to snuff. This game looks amazing, performs fantastic, doesn't require more than 50% of my CPU most of the time. I'm graphically bottlenecked by the card I have, and that's a surprise. In cities, I'll get up to about 80% use, with about 10% use being background noise, just because I have other applications open on my computer. I'm honestly shocked with how well this game runs. If anyone was on the fence wondering if this was a game to get, and I can't blame you considering there was a graphical downgrade, but at least in my opinion, they ripped out a shit ton of GameWorks from the game, GameWorks and PhysX effects. I could not give a flying fuck one way or another if they did that, just because I don't like NVIDIA. I have my reasons, and I'll probably make a video on that myself later, but for now, I don't see the graphical downgrade as that big of a deal when it is one of the best looking games that we currently have, especially texture-wise. You really have to lick walls to find bad textures in the game when you have it set to Ultra, and because the low RAM requirement on your graphics card, anyone can set it to Ultra. This is a very impressive game. I will give it that. Screenshots may not do it justice, but knowing the low requirements, the low-end requirements on the Steam page, on the GOG page, adequately tell you that yes, you can play it at that. Whereas Grand Theft Auto 5, it tells me my CPU is well above the minimum, but it doesn't play well above the minimum. That's disappointing to me. Anyways, if performance-wise was the only concern you have for the game, I'd say jump on it if you have a good enough computer. And you should know what your CPU is and what your GPU is and what you're getting into here. But yeah, this game does not require a lot of RAM, it does not require a lot of video RAM, it does not require a lot of CPU power. You are most likely going to be bottlenecked by the GPU. Now, at a later date, I will be putting out an impressions video. I'm not going to be able to do a full review of this game since it's said to be 200 hours long. There's just not a fucking chance I'm getting through it within a month. I don't play the game that much to be able to tell you the whole review. But I will give you my impressions on I believe if it was worth the $60 I paid for it. Indications are telling me yes, but hold out if that is really what you're worried about. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you want to support me, watch other videos, subscribe, comment. Every little bit helps, especially when my channel's still small. Thank you in advance.